Hi y'all, here with another book video, this time talking all about summertime book recs. I'm so excited for this video because we are in the full swing of things. We're in the middle of summer, so definitely gonna come in clutch with these recommendations, I think. So let's just jump right in. I have quite a few that I own, but honestly most of them I don't own because I've either read through the library or that's about it. Okay, so also I'm going to be splitting them up into genres. So I have a couple of genres that I'm going to recommend books within. So for example, there's romance, there's fiction, historical fiction, thriller, fiction, fantasy genre. So I'm just gonna start right off. Which genre do we want to hear first? Let me go with historical fiction first because I only have 2 books in that genre. The first book that I'm going to recommend is called The Berry Pickers, and I am recommending this book because I actually just read it and it was a 5-star read for me. I thought this book was brilliant. It's about an indigenous family here in the United States, and this takes place, I don't quite know the date, but it takes place a little bit ago for it to be considered historical fiction. There's a family of, I believe, 3 boys and 2 girls, and during a summer, one of the girls, her name is Ruthie, she's 6 years old, she kind of goes and sits on a rock and then disappears. Yeah, the family can't find her. Obviously they're devastated. They don't get over this for a very long time. And then we have dual POVs in this book, so that's really interesting. And then that's part of the book, and another part of the book is about this woman named Nora who lives with her family and her parents, but she suffers from these really weird, almost like dreams, and she doesn't know what's going on, and there's like family secrets and whatnot. So I'm just gonna give that as the basic premise of what this book is about. Regardless, I think you guys should read it. It's perfect for the summertime because the ambiance is definitely giving summer, but also I thought it just kind of is one of those ones that's heartwarming. It's centered on family. There's like a carnival in it, which is heartbreaking. I definitely recommend it. Historical fiction has a special place in my heart, and this one for sure is in that category. And of course the cover is screaming summer. The next historical fiction book that I'm going to recommend is actually Daisy Jones and the Six. This is a tried and true recommendation. This book actually now has, I think it's an Amazon Prime TV show. So of course, once you finish the book, you can jump into the series. This is perfect for the summertime. This is historical fiction, but it is about a fictional band. And it's a very interesting concept the way the book is written because it's interview style. So it's literally just, you know, the bandmates kind of telling the story of what happened. The main character is Daisy, that's her name, Daisy Jones, and you can just see how she ends up in this band, who she is, the inner workings of the bands. There's friendships, relationships. I just think it's so good. It's brilliant. It's Taylor Jenkins Reid. You can't go wrong. Okay, that was historical fiction. Now let's move to like the fiction / fantasy section. Again, I only have 2 books for this genre as well, just because that's not a genre that I usually read, but I definitely recommend these 2 books. The first one being House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. It takes place during the summertime, I'm pretty sure, so that's obviously a dead giveaway, but I always recommend this book specifically for people who work with kids, just because the main character in this book is a social worker, and he's given the job to go and work at an orphanage with like magical kids. These kids have like superpowers, and of course they're kind of demonized by society, so he kind of goes and is like, who are these people? And just kind of figures out who they are, gets to live with them for a little bit, and then it kind of unravels from there. But like I mentioned, if you work with kids, this book is definitely gonna hit you in the heart because it just is so sentimental and heartwarming. And yeah, it's a fun ride. It's very interesting. I haven't read anything quite like it, so I definitely loved it and I do recommend it. The next fiction / fantasy book that I'm gonna recommend is Remarkably Bright Creatures. This book is brilliant. It's super adorable. It takes place in a small town over the summer too, I believe. It's just kind of like a lighthearted, quick-paced read. It is heartwarming, it is emotional, but it's more happy in my opinion. But this, in a nutshell, is about a talking octopus, which of course, in my opinion, I would have been like, that doesn't sound like my cup of tea. I saw tons of people talking about this book, and then I read it and I realized why tons of people talk about this book. It is so good. These 2 books definitely fall into like a little genre that I like dipped my toe in a few times, which is like fiction, but it has like a fantasy element, and that's, I mean, it's a talking octopus in this book specifically, so that's kind of why this one falls into that genre. It's fun and entertaining to read. Okay, moving right along, now we're gonna move on to romance. I think that's the genre a lot of people are excited for because that's one of my, if not my favorite genre, so let's just dive right in. The first one that I'm gonna recommend is of course my tried and true, one of my favorite romance books ever, Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I love it. The romance is amazing. It's one POV, her name is Macy, she's the main character, but it flip-flops between dual timelines, so then and now. Basically this is about Macy and her best friend Elliot. They're childhood friends who live literally right next door to each other in like a cabin. And they're book lovers, which is something that's really special about this book. I absolutely adore books that are about books and are about people who love books, because I am one of those people. So that always hits home. A basic trope, childhood friends to lovers, second chance romance. It's a little muddy, a little murky. It's a romance, but it has a bit more depth to it, which I appreciate in the romance books that I read. And like I mentioned, this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite romance book ever, just because it is so good. The romance is great. The plot is great. I love dual timeline. It's not hard to follow at all. And these two characters are really awesome. All right, next a romance recommendation is kind of a 2-for-1 or like 4-in-1, depends on the way you see it. But basically, yeah, Emily Henry. Any Emily Henry book, you're pretty golden. These two specifically and her new one, Funny Story, I think are perfect beach reads. Funny, but they're perfect summer rom-coms. That's all they are, basically. They're summer rom-coms. Look at this. If this is not giving summer vibes, I don't know what is. If this title and cover are not giving summer vibes, I don't know what will. If you have never read Emily Henry, I think right now during the summertime is the perfect time to dive into her book. They're rom-coms, and then they have all sorts of different tropes. Multiple tropes in one usually. So like there's fake dating, there's enemies to lovers, there's forced proximity. Like I'm just trying to think of the ones off the top of my head, but some of these books have multiple tropes in them, so I think they're really good. They're staples. People love them for a reason. So yeah, I definitely recommend. I am currently reading People We Meet on Vacation. So actually I'm not reading it, but it's on my TBR this month, so I don't want to recommend that one just because I've never read it. But by the cover and title, I think you're safe with any Emily Henry book. Moving right along, hopefully nothing changed too much. I had to change out the camera battery, so hopefully it kind of looks the same. But anyway, going back to romance, next author. This is another author that I would recommend basically any of her books for a perfect beach read or summer romance. That is Miss Carly Fortune. So these two books I have read. I think she's only written 3 books and I have all 3, but the third one is on my TBR cart, so I haven't read it. Can't really recommend it, but I mean, this summer will be different is the title. Like it's definitely perfect for the summer as well, I'm sure. But these two are really, really good. This one is my favorite by this author. This one I still enjoyed, but I just think if you're gonna like debating between these two, I would choose this one. This is a staple, really popular. It's so good. This one is definitely kind of second chance romance. Vibes are heavy in this book. This one is pretty similar to Love in Other Words. So if you liked that one, then you would like this one. Or if you read this one, then you would love Love in Other Words. This was 6 summers to fall in love, 1 moment to fall apart, a weekend to get it right. I think I want to reread this one in the future. This is the staple like beach read summer romance. So definitely if you're kind of in the bind, don't know what to read, what to pick up in the summer, Carly Fortune, you cannot go wrong with these books. Again, they're very heavy on the summer romance. Yeah, second chances, romance, they all take place like by a lake, as you can see by the cover. So it's always like a small town as well, which is always fun to read about. My other romance recommendations I don't own, but the next one is going to be 7 Days in June. This is a holy grail. I love this book. This I read because it is a Reese's book club pick from a few years ago, and that's my favorite book club, so I stumbled upon this one, read it, loved it. Basically, this is another one of those special books that's like about book lovers, because the 2 main characters in this book are authors. So there's the female main character and the male main character, and they're both authors and they both have a history, but in present time they don't talk, they don't like see each other or anything, but we kind of pull back the curtain into what happened. They were so close when they were younger, and then they just aren't close anymore, but then they find each other both in New York, and so we flop back into the past and into the present, and this romance is a whirlwind, but I love it. This is one of my favorite Reese's Book Club books by far, and definitely top 10 favorite romance books out there for me, because it's just so enjoyable. There's chronic illness and disability representation, which is always super important. This is 2 Black Americans, so I love that. What also I love about this book, everything, honestly, is just so good, and definitely a top recommendation. Okay, moving on is The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary. This book is very interesting. Basically, it's just a group of friends who are in a car trying to drive to a wedding. So that's why it's called The Road Trip. And then they kind of get stuck and sidelined, but 2 of the people in the car are like ex-lovers, ex-flings, and then we get flung to the past where we kind of discover their summer of romance and like what happened, how they met, how that builds. And I just remember the summer vibes being very heavy. It takes place in like Italy, I think, or somewhere in Europe. And it's during the summertime. So picture, you know, little cafes, little bakeries, croissants, this huge villa. If you're looking for those types of vibes, I definitely think this book is up there for you. Beth O'Leary is also very underrated in my opinion. I always think her books are great. They're romance, but there's huge depth to it, usually something that revolves around mental health, which I love that about her book. So yeah. This is the final romance recommendation, and it is going to be Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Now this book is now part of a 3-book series, I believe, but I haven't read those. I've only read this one, so I'm going to recommend this one just because, again, summer vibes, heavy, there's a camping trip, it's a steamy romance, it's an LGBT romance. Yeah, I just thought this one was fun. It was different. It was fast paced. If you want just a quick, steamy, summertime LGBT romance, then this is a perfect recommendation for you. Moving on, let's dive into fiction. So the first one that I'm going to recommend, actually, here it is. Sorry, I'm looking for it because I know I own it, but this is going to be the first one I'm going to recommend. It's called Lucky. And essentially this is about a con woman who's on a heist on the run from the police, and she wins the lottery accidentally. So yeah, like what do you do in that case? But anyway, this one is really interesting. It's another dual timeline book, so it goes back to when she was younger, growing up with her dad, who was also a con man, so kind of teaching her everything she needs to know about that sort of lifestyle. And then we go to the present where she's on the run, on the heist, and then the two timelines eventually meet up. The stuff in here is pretty crazy. It's funny, it's lighthearted, it's super fast paced, it's super short. So I think that's also why I want to recommend this book, is because obviously it's summer vibes and it's quick, but it's just a great story, great little plot. I love the plot devices. I love the alternating timelines, and it's short. So this is the perfect little book wrapped in a bow. The next one that I want to recommend is one of my favorite books. It is Firefly Lane by Miss Kristen Hanna. This is an amazing book about two best friends, Kate and Tully. And essentially it's just about, that's what it's about. It's about these two women, and they meet when they're in like middle school or early high school, and then it just shows us their entire life up until they're like older women. And there's children, there's marriage, there's love, there's heartbreak, there's like jobs, everything. So it doesn't sound super interesting, but the storytelling is phenomenal. It's Miss Kristen Hanna, so you know you're gonna be invested. It is a bit of a bigger book, but I promise it reads super quickly because, like I mentioned, Kristen Hanna is just a top tier author and she knows what she's doing. So it honestly, I don't even get intimidated by Kristen Hanna books anymore because they're just so entertaining, and honestly the bigger the better because you just get to spend more time with these characters. But yeah, it takes place in the Pacific Northwest, and where I get the summer vibes is because they're like childhood friends. You just, when you think about your childhood and your friendships at that point, you know, it's a special time in your life. And I don't know about you, but for me, I feel like I think back to summertime and just hanging with like my best friend. And there's definitely scenes of that. Also in the summertime, I feel like I sometimes just want to read about like friendships and women, and this is the book for that type of mood. Next one, which I'm now thinking might be a historical fiction, I'm not sure, it's kind of both, but it is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now this is another book that's super popular. I'm sure you've seen it everywhere, but I feel like this is one of the lesser popular Taylor Jenkins Reid books, but in my opinion, this is, I think, my favorite, if not like my second favorite. I love this book. I think it is so entertaining. It's about a family who is like wealthy. They live in California, in Malibu specifically, and every year they throw this like killer end of the summer party. At the beginning of the book, the house is like burned. Like the house burns down after this phenomenal party. And so you just kind of go backwards in time because it starts off with the house literally being on fire, and we go backwards to just kind of figure out what the heck happened. But this is great. There's drama because it's a family of like young adults and teenagers, so you kind of get into like betrayals, secrets, all this stuff. Nina Riva, so if you've read other Taylor Jenkins Reid books and you know of like Mick Riva, who is a character, this is his family essentially. So the oldest daughter, her name is Nina Riva, and I just want to pause on that for a second because she is one of my favorite book characters ever. She's so strong, she leads her family, she raises her siblings, she's like beautiful, she's a professional surfer, I believe. Like these summer vibes cannot be beat with this book, and like I mentioned, this one just gives you that like emotional family edge that you sometimes look for in books. This book is very special to me. Nina Riva, I love you, and I definitely want to reread this now. All right, gonna kind of go a bit quicker through these next three because I don't own them. So the next one is The Paper Palace, which is another Reese's Book Club book, and I'm not gonna lie, when I first read this, it took me a minute to get through. There are, I would say from what I remember, check your trigger warnings because there are some topics that are pretty heavy to read about, but it does take place on the lake by a beach house. It gives you all those summer vibes, and I just remember thinking back to it. Like in the moment when I was reading it, I didn't love it, but I always think back to this book. I don't know why. There's like a fireworks show, so it's very summer heavy. There are heavy topics discussed. That's why I say check the trigger warnings. But I believe this is just kind of like a romance or about a woman. I'm not even gonna try to describe it because I honestly don't remember what it's about, but it like I think about it, so that's why it's worth recommending in my opinion. Next one is The Summer Pact. I read this just last month. This is a new release coming out this month actually. Yeah, the summer vibes are heavy in this one. They go on a trip to Italy and Europe. It's a group of best friends, college best friends. Tragedy strikes, so they kind of just try to find, you know, common footing. This is basically all about friendship vibes and how these college friendships last through your life and how important they are. Super quick pace and like super fast. In my opinion, it should have been longer than it was, but it wasn't, or it isn't, so yeah. I still recommend it. Definitely great for the summer vibes. The last one in the fiction genre is gonna be The Guncle. Now this one's kind of funny, and I believe a part 2 is coming out this year, if not this month maybe, but this one's really funny. It's about an uncle who is gay. That's why he's called The Guncle, but it's his nephew and niece are, their mom died, so I think it's his sister, I don't know, but he's basically has to take care of these kids, and he's like a popular or famous actor, and so he lives in Palm Springs. That's where the summer vibes come in, and the two kids have to kind of live with him for a bit, and they just get into these like funny little situations. It's very heartwarming seeing their relationship form and, you know, them getting closer to each other. I read this one I feel like 2 summers ago, so I don't remember too much about it, but heavy on the summer vibes. All right, the last genre is going to be thriller slash mystery, which you might think thriller mystery gives me like fall winter vibes, but these ones specifically bring the summer vibes heavy. First one I want to talk about is Before We Were Innocent, another Reese's Book Club pick. Essentially this is about a group of best friends. I think there's 3 women, and they're on their like summer grad trip, and tragedy strikes, of course. One of them does not make it out of this trip, does not make it home alive, and we kind of find out what happened. The 2 best friends were kind of the 2 friends that remain. We kind of see them in the future, so like where they're at in the present time, and they're kind of trying to live with what happened. One of them is kind of going through it, and the other one is just like successful, but it's kind of like she benefited off of the death of the best friend. And so obviously we kind of get into their relationship, which is very strained. There's tensions, a new tragedy strikes, so that kind of brings them together to reflect upon the original tragedy that happened on their grad trip summer. So this one takes place in like Greece, in a villa, the beach. Look at the cover. It's a great thriller for this time of the year. The next one that I'm going to talk about is Reckless Girls. This book is so good. It is one of those thrillers that is super fast paced. I ate this up in like a day or less. This is about a woman named Lux and her boyfriend Nico. They're hired by 2 women to sail them to a remote island. And once they get to the remote island, this island is like kind of haunted, has scary, creepy vibes of it being like shipwrecks, cannibalism, stuff like that. But they arrive to this island, and then once they arrive, they find another boat that's already there. And the people who are already there on this new boat are like a super idealistic couple who look perfect. So then they join the group, and then there's one random stranger in his own little boat that shows up to the island. So then it kind of throws chaos and wrenches into this kind of newfound group, and then a person goes missing. It starts to just kind of feel like the island is eating them alive in a way, and it was so good. It was so fast paced, super entertaining, gave the perfect vibes because it takes place on an island. You need to read this book if you want the perfect like thriller vibes during the summertime. All right, heading to my last 2 recommendations. The next one is going to be Every Last Secret. This is another thriller mystery. And now this one, if you like thrillers that are like Desperate Housewives, like whodunit, what's happening, this is your best bet. There's, you know, this suburban family life, and there's like nosy neighbors, there's cheating scandals, there's drama, all sorts of things. This one gives me summer vibes specifically because of the cover, but also because I just remember there being like a backyard party or backyard get together, a limoncello, just things that like associate. I don't even remember if this does take place in the summer, but just from what I remember, it gives me summer vibes. So I think that's why I'm like correlating this book to the summertime. But for sure, if you're into those types of thrillers and mysteries that take place in like a community with like these different characters, this is your best bet. Okay, the last one I'm gonna recommend is called We Were Never Here by Andrea Bartz. Now this is another Reese's Book Club pick, so that's how I first read it. But this one, definitely summer vibes. This is about two friends, Emily and Kristen, and annually they do this little like backpacking trip. So we're current in the present time, they're in Chile having the time of their lives. And then one night, Emily comes into their hotel room and there's blood everywhere. Kristen swears that the cute little backpacker she was meeting up with was trying to attack her, and so there's that whole chaos. But then Emily herself is thinking, well, this is eerily similar to a previous trip that we had where stuff like this also happened. So of course that's a red flag, that's suspicious. And so they kind of just deal with it. So then they come back to their home and they're kind of trying to figure out what happened. Emily is very kind of suspicious of Kristen, and then Kristen comes to find Emily, and just things happen. There's like secrets, there's things that come up, shocking revelations, and this one is definitely a little bit of a whirlwind, but it's definitely fast paced. I think this one's interesting because it's about two best friends, it's just them, and all this stuff happens, and it's like who to trust, what actually happened. That's it. All right, so those were all of my recommendations. I think this is like 20 plus recommendations. So hopefully you guys found something that interests you in this entire video. But I've read all of these books, thought they were brilliant, definitely bring the summer vibes, and I hope you guys found something that you'll like to read. But that's it. Now I'm gonna clean up this mess on my floor because I have books everywhere. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.